The night he left me still burns in my memory, like a wound that refuses to heal. The rain had poured relentlessly, washing away the last traces of his footsteps as he stormed out of our home. His arm wrapped possessively around the waist of that woman, his mistress, the same woman who had once smiled at me across dinner tables and complimented my taste in clothes, all while plotting to steal my husband. I stood there, barefoot and trembling, the wedding band cold in my hand. He didn't even look back. For weeks, I drowned in silence. The whispers of neighbors, the pitying glances, the humiliating phone calls, all of it became a cruel chorus that played in my head day and night. But pain, I learned, can be alchemized into something far more powerful. Revenge. He had called me weak. "You'll never survive without me," he'd said. I repeated those words every night until they turned into a vow. I would rise, not just to survive, but to make him watch as everything he thought I couldn't do, I did better than he ever imagined. It started small. I rebuilt myself from the ashes he left behind. I sold the jewelry he gave me, gifts that now felt poison, and invested in the one thing I had always been good at, design. Within months, my sketches turned into a brand, a luxury fashion line that caught attention faster than I expected. My name began appearing in magazines, not as his wife, but as Amara Delane, the designer who came from nowhere. He watched from the shadows. I knew he did. His company, the empire I once helped him build, had started crumbling under mismanagement and greed. The mistress, it seemed, had expensive tastes and no understanding of loyalty. Karma, I thought, had impeccable timing. One evening, while hosting a charity gala, I felt a presence behind me. His voice, low and hesitant, brushed against my ear. "Amara, you look different." I turned to face him. That's what freedom does to a woman. He smiled faintly, but his eyes betrayed the desperation beneath. "I need your help," he said, almost whispering. "The board is threatening to replace me. Investors are pulling out." Stop. I raised a hand. "You don't get to need me now. Not after everything you did." The mistress had left him, of course. Rumors said she'd run off with one of his clients. Poetic, really. He betrayed me for someone who didn't even stay. But his downfall wasn't enough for me. Not yet. Revenge, if it's to be perfect, must be served with elegance, not rage. So I smiled. "I'll help you," I said. His eyes lit up, foolishly believing forgiveness came so easily. "But I'll own half your company. You'll sign over control to me. Publicly." He hesitated, but desperation has a way of bending pride. Within days, his signature was on every document I presented. His empire, his pride, was now mine. When the press conference came, cameras flashed as he stood beside me, eyes hollow, jaw tight. I spoke to the crowd with grace, every word calculated, every smile sharp as glass. "Today marks a new era for Delane Industries," I announced. "A company rebuilt on integrity, not betrayal." He flinched at the word. Everyone saw it. Later that night, he came to me again, not as the arrogant man who once broke me, but as someone stripped of power, dignity, and control. "Why are you doing this, Amara?" he asked, voice shaking. I walked toward him slowly, heels echoing on the marble floor. "Because," I whispered, "you taught me what destruction feels like. I'm just returning the lesson with interest." His knees buckled. The same man who once called me useless now begged for mercy, eyes glistening with tears. "Please, Amara, don't take everything. I have nothing left." I leaned closer, brushing a finger down his cheek, the gesture soft and venomous all at once. "You still have your pride," I murmured. "Hold on to that, while it lasts." He left that night, broken beyond repair. But for me, it wasn't about his ruin anymore. It was about my rebirth. My revenge wasn't destruction. It was transformation. He betrayed me for a fleeting desire, and in doing so, he handed me the fire I needed to become unstoppable. But fate, it seems, wasn't done with us yet. Weeks later, a mysterious letter arrived at my office, and signed but sealed with a crest I knew all too well, his family's emblem. Inside was a message written in his handwriting. You think you won, but you've only started a war you don't understand. I stared at the words for a long time, the ink bleeding into the paper like a warning. And for the first time in months, I felt something stir inside me, not fear but curiosity. Because if he was truly planning to fight back, then he was about to learn that I wasn't the same woman he betrayed. I was something far more dangerous. The letter trembled slightly between my fingers as I read it again and again, each word sinking into my mind like a slow poison. You've only started a war you don't understand. He had signed nothing, but I could almost hear his voice, low, bitter, defiant, echoing in every curve of the letters. For a moment, I wondered if it was just another attempt to unsettle me, a final cry from a man who had lost everything. But deep down, I knew him too well. When Alexander made threats, he followed through. That night, I couldn't sleep. The sound of rain against the windows carried me back to that night he left me. Only this time, the storm wasn't outside. It was within me. I sat by the glass wall of my penthouse, city lights flickering below like dying stars, and wondered what his next move could possibly be. He had no company, no influence, no allies left. But Alexander was the kind of man who thrived on control, and men like him rarely vanished quietly. Days passed, and business moved on as usual. My designs were being featured on international runways. Interviews and magazine covers called me the woman who rebuilt herself from ashes. It was intoxicating. The recognition, the respect, the quiet envy. But beneath the applause, I felt the faint pulse of something darker. Every time I entered my office, I felt eyes on me. The security team assured me there was nothing unusual, yet the tension in the air had a pulse of its own. Then came the invitation, a prestigious business forum in Cape Town, hosted by one of the few organizations powerful enough to gather industry titans from across continents. I was scheduled to speak about resilience and female empowerment. Ironic, given a man who had once crushed mine might now be somewhere plotting his comeback. Still, I accepted. I wanted the world to see what power looked like when born from betrayal. The morning of the event, I dressed with deliberate precision, a black silk gown that draped like a shadow and diamonds that shimmered like tiny shards of vengeance. As I stepped onto the stage, cameras flashed, applause erupted, and for a moment, the world belonged entirely to me, until I saw him, standing at the back of the hall, half hidden behind a column. Alexander watched with an expression that was neither anger nor regret, but something colder, calculation. His eyes met mine for a single, electric moment before he slipped away into the crowd. I kept speaking, my voice smooth and unwavering, but inside, my heartbeat thundered like a warning drum. After the event, I tried to find him. No one had seen him leave. The hotel staff claimed there was no record of him checking in. Yet, when I returned to my suite, there was again another letter placed neatly on my desk as though someone had walked straight past security. You built an empire with the pieces of mine, but you forgot empires can crumble twice. There was no signature, only a small silver cufflink enclosed inside, engraved with his initials. I tightened my grip on it until it pressed into my palm. He was toying with me, reminding me that no matter how high I climbed, he could still reach me. The old Amara might have broken again, but this version of me, sharper, colder, forged by betrayal, would not yield. I hired a private investigator, a man named Kellen, who had once worked with corporate intelligence. Within a week, he returned with information that made my blood freeze. Alexander wasn't destroyed at all. He had quietly partnered with a foreign investor, a shadowy consortium that specialized in hostile takeovers. Their latest target? My company. He was coming for me, not with emotion, but with strategy, with money, with patience. For days, I barely slept. Every document, every contract, every name connected to Delane Industries was combed through. I found traces of unknown accounts buying small shares of my company, hidden beneath shell corporations. It was subtle, brilliant even, the kind of plan only Alexander could conceive. He wasn't trying to hurt me physically. He wanted to own me again, to watch me lose everything I had built, piece by piece, until I was back where I started, powerless. But I wasn't that woman anymore. I arranged a meeting with him myself. No lawyers, no intermediaries, just us. The invitation was simple. Dinner, one last conversation. He arrived exactly on time. He always did. The restaurant was private, candlelit, with a view of the ocean stretching into darkness. When he sat across from me, I was struck by how different he looked. Older, wearier, but his eyes still carried that familiar arrogance, the belief that he could outsmart the world. "You've been busy," I said quietly. He smirked. "You taught me well." I leaned forward. "You think this will make me afraid?" He laughed softly. "Afraid? No, but maybe it will remind you who built you. Without me, Amara, you were nothing." The words cut, but only for a heartbeat. Then I smiled, slow, deliberate, deadly. "You're right," I said. "You did build me, but you built the version of me that destroyed you." His jaw tightened. The waiter poured wine. Silence settled like tension before a storm. "I'm not here to destroy you, Amara," he said finally. "I'm here to take back what's mine. You've had your revenge. You made me crawl. Now it's my turn to rebuild, and I'll start with you." I studied him. Every flicker of expression, every word heavy with pride and wounded ego. There was no love left between us, only obsession, a dangerous, electric obsession that neither of us had managed to escape. "Then may the best builder win," I said softly. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The waves outside crashed against the rocks, mirroring the unspoken war that simmered between us. He left without another word, but as he walked away, I felt the chill of inevitability settle over me. This wasn't the end. It was a new beginning, darker, more calculated, more ruthless. When I returned to my penthouse that night, the city felt different, quieter, as if it knew what was coming. I stood by the window again, watching lightning ripple across the horizon, and realized something terrifyingly thrilling. This battle wasn't about love or revenge anymore. It was about power, about who could hold it longer without breaking. And somewhere deep down, I knew I didn't want him gone. Not yet, because a part of me still wanted him to see how powerful I could become while he tried and failed to destroy me. The war between us had no rules now, only strategy, only dominance. And the first move was mine. The city slept under a sky bruised with storm clouds and night. Everything came full circle. The boardroom lights glowed cold and white as I sat at the head of the table, staring at the contracts before me. Delane Industries, my empire, my creation, my triumph, was about to face its final test. Every rumor I had heard, every whisper from the corporate underworld, every unexplained transaction had led to this moment. Alexander had made his move. It wasn't a direct attack. That would have been too easy. He had wormed his way in through investors, through alliances dressed in polished smiles and false promises. By the time I realized how deep his plan ran, it was almost too late. Almost. I looked up as the glass door swung open, and there he was, the man who had once been my husband, my betrayer, my rival, my mirror in this brutal game of ambition. He walked in with that same quiet confidence, the one that used to make people believe he was invincible. His suit was sharp, his presence sharper, but his eyes, they told the truth. There was exhaustion there, a shadow of something broken. "You're early," I said coolly. "I never liked waiting," he replied, his voice smooth, but his hands betrayed it with a faint tremor. "I wanted to see the look on your face when you realize it's over." I rose from my chair slowly. "You've tried to ruin me twice, Alexander. And both times, you underestimated the one thing you can't manipulate." He smiled faintly. "And what's that?" "Me." The storm outside cracked open, lightning flaring against the glass walls as though the heavens themselves wanted to witness our reckoning. I slid a file across the table. He hesitated, then opened it, his eyes widening as he scanned the pages. "You thought I wouldn't find out," I continued, "about the dummy corporations, the offshore accounts, the false board members you planted. But here's what you forgot. You taught me how to destroy people silently. You gave me every tool I needed." His lips parted, but no words came out. "By the time you finish reading those papers," I said, "you'll realize that I now own controlling shares in your new company, the one you built to replace mine. You've been fighting a ghost, Alexander. Every dollar you raised, every investor you brought in, I've already bought them out. His face went pale. You... Yes, I interrupted softly. You came to take back what was yours, and in doing so, you handed me everything that was left of you. The silence that followed was suffocating. The man who once commanded rooms with a single glance now looked small, cornered, human. He sank into the nearest chair, his pride collapsing beneath the weight of realization. How long? He finally whispered. Since the night you showed up in Cape Town, I said. The moment I saw you in that hall, I knew you wouldn't stop until one of us was gone. So I made sure it wouldn't be me. The thunder rolled again, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. He looked down at his hands. The same hands that once wore the ring I had melted down into a necklace I never wore. When he looked up again, his eyes held something I hadn't seen in years. Not arrogance, not hatred, regret. Was it worth it? He asked quietly. All this? The revenge, the empire, the power? I thought about it, really thought. About the nights I cried myself to sleep, the battles I fought alone, the empire I built from pain. It wasn't about worth, I said finally. It was about never letting you define me again. He nodded slowly, almost respectfully. Then I suppose this is where it ends. I studied him, this man who had once been everything and then nothing. No, Alexander, I said, my voice a whisper edged with steel. This is where you end. I'll keep going, because I've learned something you never did. Real power doesn't come from control. It comes from survival. He stood, shoulders slumped, pride shattered. For a long moment, he just looked at me, as if trying to memorize the woman he had created by breaking. Then he walked toward the door, stopped, and said without turning back, You were always stronger than I wanted to admit. I know, I replied. When the door shut behind him, the echo lingered like a final heartbeat of a long, dying war. I stood there for a while, listening to the storm fade into silence. It should have felt like victory, and in a way, it did. But buried beneath that satisfaction was something unexpected. Peace. For years, I had defined myself by revenge. Every success, every smile, every step forward had been built on the ashes of betrayal. But now, as I watched the rain trace slow paths down the glass, I realized I no longer needed vengeance. I had already won. The next morning, the newspapers carried headlines that made the world gasp. The Queen of Power reigns supreme. Amara Delane acquires her rival's empire. They called it a masterstroke, a game of corporate chess no one saw coming. They celebrated me as ruthless, brilliant, unstoppable. But none of them knew the truth, that beneath the armor and the empire was a woman who had learned to wield pain as power. A week later, I received one final letter. No threats this time. No hidden meanings. Just a single line in Alexander's familiar handwriting. You won. Take care of the kingdom we both built. It was strange, the peace that came with those words. I folded the letter carefully, placed it in a drawer, and never spoke of it again. Months passed. My company flourished. I traveled across continents, giving speeches about strength, about rising from the ashes. People looked at me and saw success, elegance, confidence. None of them saw the scars beneath, and I preferred it that way. Scars are proof of survival, not weakness. But sometimes late at night, I would stand by the window and think of him, not with hatred, but with a kind of distant sorrow. He had been my greatest pain and my greatest teacher. Without him, I would never have discovered the woman I was capable of becoming. He had broken me, and in doing so, had given birth to my power. The city beneath me pulsed with life. Lights glittered like fragments of the past, scattered across the darkness. My reflection in the glass was no longer the fragile woman who once begged for love or revenge. It was something else entirely. A queen carved from chaos, a woman who had faced a storm and walked through it unburned. And maybe that was a true revenge. Not his downfall, not the empire, not the whispers of admiration that followed me everywhere. The true revenge was peace. To look at everything he tried to destroy and realize I had turned it into gold. I smiled faintly, the kind of smile that holds both victory and forgiveness. You taught me to fight, I murmured to the empty room. But you never expected me to win. Somewhere beyond the skyline, thunder rumbled one last time, distant, fading, as if even the storm knew its part of my story was over. I turned away from the window, my heels clicking softly against the marble, and walked toward the future I had built with my own hands. Not out of vengeance anymore, but out of power, grace, and freedom. For once, I didn't look back, because I finally understood the greatest revenge isn't making them suffer. It's living so magnificently that they fade into the background of your brilliance, nothing more than a shadow against your light. And as the doors of my penthouse closed behind me, the world outside whispered my name not as the woman he betrayed, but as the woman who rose higher than anyone believed she could.